In this video, we will discuss a thriller about a group of teenagers who find a mysterious egg on the beach. When it hatches on the next day, it turns into a terrifying monster. Can they survive from the monsters? Let's see the entire storyline of The Sand. The Sand begins by showing a view of a beautiful beach. There was a group of teenagers who were seen partying on the beach at night. In the middle of the party, a boy made a rule where everyone at the party was not allowed to use cell phones at all. So he collected all their cell phones and put them in the trunk of the car. Not long after that, two boys carried a large lump filled with mucus. It looks like an alien egg. The boys said that the strange object was found not far from the beach. Unbeknownst to them, this strange object will bring havoc when the sun rises the next day. The morning is approaching. A girl named Kaylee wakes up. Not long after, a boy named Mitch also woke up from his sleep. Kaylee and Mitch are at the lifeguard's house. Meanwhile, their friends were seen fast asleep in the car. There, Kaylee saw her boyfriend, Jonah, sleeping with Kaylee's best friend, Shonda. Kaylee couldn't believe that Jonah had an affair with Shonda. A guy named Vance and his girlfriend, Ronnie, wake up in the back seat while Marcia wakes up on a beach chair. Kaylee saw a seabird looking for food until suddenly the bird was sucked into the sand. Marcia, who was still sleepy, tried to get out of the chair. Kaylee immediately shouted, asking her to stay away from the beach sand, but Marcia had already stepped on the sand until her feet suddenly felt heavy. It was as if a magnet was pulling her into the sand. Everyone was so panicked seeing Marcia's condition. At that time, Vance tried to help Marcia. Quickly, he jumped out of the car, but suddenly his legs felt heavy until he was sucked in by the sand too. Vance's face, which was facing the sand, began to be gnawed by something until his face was torn and bleeding. It wasn't long before Vance and Marcia sank and disappeared. They were shocked that they would lose two of their friends that morning. They planned to call the police station, but they just realized that their cell phone is in the car's trunk. Mitch, who had the idea of collecting cell phones, was blamed. Moreover, it turned out that they secretly entered the beach, which was not actually open, because the seawater was polluted. Jonah, who was in the car, tried to start the engine. But it turned out that the car battery was dry, and he forgot to replace it before leaving for the beach. The car was not able to run at all. Kaylee, curious about the creature in the sand, finally used her hands to lure the creature out. Sure enough, the strange creature was shaped like hair and looked very thin. A friend of theirs named Gilbert just woke up from his sleep and was trapped in a trash can. Gilbert tried to get out of the trash can by shaking the barrel constantly. His friends immediately shouted for him not to move at all. Gilbert finally fell silent after being told that there was something in the sand. He was also so shocked when he found out that two of his friends had died from being sucked up by the sand on the beach. Gilbert finally had to endure and stay in that trash can. They began to despair and only hoped that someone would come to help them. Ronnie, who lost her boyfriend, writes a letter to her mother. Without food and no drink, they can only wait for something uncertain. Then they realized that the people who attended last night's party were gone and drowned in the beach sand. In other words, there are only 6 of them left on this beach. Not far away, Kaylee saw that the large boulder that had been found last night had been torn apart. Ronnie also realized that the large lump looked like a newly hatched egg. They believed that the strange creature under the sand most likely came from the giant egg. Jonah then had the idea to take the things that were in Marcia's bag. In the back of the car there are 2 surfboards that Jonah can use to walk. He put the surfboards one by one to step. As he approached the chair, the surfboard that Jonah was stepping on shifted and moved further away. Jonah tried to keep his body from touching the sand at all, but the monster instead came out of the beach sand and touched Jonah's stomach. Luckily he survived and managed to jump into a chair. But his stomach was injured because it was bitten by the monster. Jonah looks like a poisoned person trying hard to endure the pain. He said his stomach felt like he had been stung by thousands of jellyfish. While taking the pain, Jonah opened the contents of Marcia's bag and found some canned drinks. One by one, his friends were thrown drinking water by Jonah. As he threw the drink at Mitch, unexpectedly, the edge of the wooden handle beside him bumped and almost fell off. Jonah's stomach wound was getting worse and festering. Jonah, who was in pain, could only lie on the chair. The 5 of them were increasingly confused how they could survive on the beach. They had to take the cell phone which was in the trunk of the car. Ronnie also plans to open the trunk while stepping on the bumper of the car. But when the trunk started to open, suddenly, there was a patrol car honking non-stop. Ronnie suddenly slipped until her right finger caught in the trunk of the car. The man is a lifeguard. He asked exactly what Kaylee and her friends were doing on this closed beach. Kaylee tells if there is something under the sand of this beach. The disbelieving Coast Guard immediately got out of the car. Surprisingly, the monster that was in the sand couldn't hurt the man's leg. They were confused how the man walked without getting hurt at all. As it turned out, the leather shoes he was wearing protected the man from monster. The Coast Guard told Kaylee and Mitch to come down to him, but they both clearly didn't want to. The Coast Guard got angry and threatened to spray them with pepper spray. Unfortunately, the man's car key fell on the sand. He took his car keys, but his hands immediately felt heavy and he could not move at all. His hands began to be sucked into the sand. The lifeguard immediately sprayed the monster that emerged from the sand with pepper spray in his hand. Unfortunately, half of the Coast Guard's arm had to be cut off and bleeding profusely. He fell and was sucked into the sand. The incident made Kaylee and her friends realize that they had to put on their shoes and run away from this beach. Chanda then threw her towel at Mitch. But Mitch fell due to the loose edge of the wood. Mitch, who was lying on the sand, began to be eaten away by the monster. His feet and hands began to slowly enter the sand, while his friends could only watch without being able to do anything. In a state of panic, Kaylee suddenly has a brilliant idea. She gave the ledge to Chanda, who was in the car. Then Kaylee jumped from the lifeguard's house into the car. They then helped Ronnie to release her pinched finger. Ronnie's finger was injured and immediately wrapped in a thick towel. On the other hand, the half of Gilbert's body that was pinched began to hurt and bleed profusely. Then Kaylee and Chanda put the wood down to cross over to the chair where Jonah was. Chanda slowly crossed while maintaining her balance. Luckily she made it. Then Kaylee went across and made it there. But when it was Ronnie's turn, she slipped and fell on the sand. Quickly, the collection of monsters sucked Ronnie into the sand. In addition, without them realizing it, the monster was trying to get into the trash can where Gilbert was. Chanda has the idea of going to the patrol car using the way Mitch had told her earlier. She then wrapped her legs in a towel and ran to the patrol car. Amazingly, she managed to do it. But Gilbert couldn't stand it. Slowly, he spat out blood from his mouth. It turned out that the monster made a hole and entered through the bottom of the trash can. Instantly, Gilbert was sucked into the sand and disappeared. Unfortunately, Chanda slipped and hit her head until she was unconscious. Now, Kaylee and Jonah can only wait until Chanda wakes up from her stupor. Night came. Chanda, who fainted, finally came to her senses and found a lifeboat on top of the patrol car. Without thinking, Chanda immediately threw the lifeboat until it inflated, then she picked up Kaylee and Jonah. Arriving at the car, Jonah looks already seriously injured. Suddenly from inside the sand, a giant monster came out, shaped like the tentacles of an octopus. The monster seemed to glow in the dark. The tentacles then began to attack Kaylee. Kaylee finally got an idea. She took a tank filled with gasoline and splashed it on the surface of the sand. This time she knew she had to destroy the monster. So by lighting the fire from the match, the monster finally caught fire. Fortunately, Kaylee managed to get into the car and was spared the terrible monster's attack. Meanwhile, the injured Jonah couldn't hold himself back anymore. He too had to die. Kaylee kissed his hand one last time. The next day, a man suddenly peeks through the car window and wakes them up. The man also seemed to be able to stand on the sand without being bothered by monster. Finally, Kaylee and Chanda got down and stood on the sand. Both are safe. The film closes with a scene of a group of monsters swimming towards another beach. Unfortunately, the visitors on the beach will be the next victim. Subscribe for more movie storyline videos. Let's unpack it together.